Everyone, and welcome to my UBA Season 2 post-draft power rankings. I was asked to do this by a few members, and I thought it'd be pretty cool to give my opinions on the teams immediately after the draft. I'll be doing this in future weeks as well. I'll probably do one every week, and for this first power rankings, it'll be based purely on the teams and how well I think they'll be able to function, and which teams I think are the strongest. Future weeks, I'll take other things into account, such as strength of schedule, hacks, and player skill, things like that. But these first power rankings is based purely on teams and which teams I think are the most powerful. So first thing, I want to make absolutely clear that these are 100% just my opinions. My opinions on why each team is rated where they are. My opinion is purely my opinion. My opinion could be wrong. I could overvalue certain things, undervalue other things, but I just want to make clear that these are my opinions, and by no means is it gospel word. And even if you have a bad team, in my opinion, even if your team's bad in general, if you're a good player and a good builder, you'll still be able to win any game, really. So, these just want to make it absolutely clear that these are just my opinions on the order of the teams right now, based on draft. I'll also not be ranking myself because I don't think I could ever do that unbiasedly. So, I'm not even going to bother. I'll just be ranking the other 11 coaches. So, first up in the number 11 slot, we have the Sesame Street Septiles and the Real PETA. So this team, it's Rain and Trick Room and Halucha. So it's got a lot of offensive synergy going on in that. Pelipper puts up the Rain, makes Coco's Thunders 100% accurate, speeds up Swampert. Rain helps out Skevalier. It's very predictable is the problem with it, and it doesn't have switches into things. Like, pretty much any given type, you can really know what his switch in, if anything, is going to be into it. He has trouble switching into the vast majority of things in the game, so he'll really just have to overwhelm his opponents with offense, and I think that becomes difficult to do when you know that a Coco with Thunder is coming, you know that Halucha with Electric Seed is coming, you know that Swift Swim Swampert's coming, and it's just too predictable, in my opinion. If you just have dedicated checks to all of these predictable sweepers, perhaps he can catch me, or perhaps he can prove me wrong and catch me off guard and bring some really unexpected things. But to me, the team seems a bit too linear and restrictive in what he can do. It's pretty much just hyper offense with standard Rain, but it has everyone knows that the Rain's coming, so it really is a bit too easy to prep for, in my opinion. So yeah, I'm not a giant fan of hyper offense in general. I think you should have switch-ins to everything in your team, and I think this hyper offense is a bit too predictable to work out. Peter can definitely prove me wrong by playing it well, possibly bringing things that aren't too expected, but in my opinion, it's not a fantastic team. So next up in number 10, I have Green Bay Pikas and Dia Winchell. So this team is Kyron Black plus Rotom Wash, which is a really scary start to the team because Rotom Wash is fantastic at grabbing momentum, bringing in Kyron Black, and Kyron Black is fantastic at destroying teams, and Aerodactyl is fantastic at cleaning teams. But I have some serious problems with how this team is fundamentally built. So Kyron Black is fantastic. Rotom Wash is a great partner for it. Even Aerodactyl is a good partner to help clean, but what I really don't like about this team is speed. You've got Aerodactyl at like 150, right? Or something ridiculous. So it gives you all the speed you would ever want. But then you have your next fastest Mon is Celebi. That is not good, in my opinion. So he's really sacrificing a lot of offensive presence by having such an enormous speed gap. Pretty much anything that's over base 100 outruns literally his entire team besides Aerodactyl, and that's really not a good look for you. The fact that if everything that they have that's over base 100, the only thing they have to worry about is Scarfers and Aerodactyl. So he's forced to bring a lot of Scarfers, and to be honest, I don't think he has very valid Scarfer users, or very valid Scarfers. Embor, very decent Scarfer. Celebi can be a very decent Scarfer, especially with U-turn grabs U momentum. Tentacruel really doesn't want to be a Scarfer. Savali really doesn't want to be a Scarfer. Miltank really doesn't want to be a Scarfer. Doublade and Florges cannot be Scarfers. Kyurem could possibly be a Scarfer, but then it loses its breaking ability. And Rotom Wash can be a Scarfer, but it really doesn't want to be. So, I really think that by making it really conflicts with the interest of Kyurem Black to have such a slow team, because he needs Scarfers to bring him momentum, and being forced to bring that many Scarfers is not a good thing in my opinion. And he's forced to play very defensively because he's going to be outsped all the time. He's got to bring a ton of Scarfers, or he's got to have very good defensive switch-ins to things to take on pretty much anything that's over base 100, because they're going to be forcing out everything he has. And in my opinion, his team is not fat enough to warrant this. His steel type is Doublade, and I really don't like Doublade as a steel. It's he has Rotom Wash to help it out with flying, but Psychic resists. Yeah, I'm not seeing it like Doublade and Celebi, but Celebi can be okay, but it doesn't really threaten Psychic types. And Doublade, if you have like any special attack investment, you're probably 3 at KOing it. It's not a good special wall. Florges can help take the pressure off of it because it is a fantastic special wall, but like if you have anything that matches up well typing, like I get that Doublade and Florges is supposed to complement each other because Doublade's got the physical defense and Florges has a special, but if you get a physical attacker who can beat Florges, or a physical attacker who can beat Doublade, or a special attacker who can beat Florges, like a Nidoking, what does this team do against a Nidoking? It just loses. Maybe Rotom Wash can like come in and pivot on one hit, but like, yeah, it's really not a good look for him. A physical fire type, things like Entei, what does he switch into that? So yeah, I'm not a fan of his defensive core. I think his defensive core is far too weak for having a team as slow as he has. Although I do really like Kyurem plus Rotom Wash and even Aerodactyl, he really needs to fix his speed tiers and get a better steal in my opinion. So yeah, that's my opinion on his team. Next is Enzo. I don't hate Enzo's team, but I think it's lacking in a lot of ways. First off, his fire resist is Haxorus, which is not a good look for you, and Blacephalon, but like when you have 50 base HP, I really don't think you can call yourself a resist to anything. Haxorus and Blacephalon are both mons that are super frail and don't appreciate switching into anything because they tend to want to be a win con if they're brought into any game. So yeah, you don't want to be switching those into fire moves. But I mean, what else does he switch into a fire move? He does have some very decent speed. Excelgor is great, Blacephalon's great, Gallade is great, Persian's pretty good, Superior's pretty good. His speed is great. His team's lacking on some bulk. His main defensive core is Empoleon, Zapdos, and Donphan. And I am a giant fan of Zapdos. I really like Zapdos. But Empoleon plus Donphan is really not going to cut it, in my opinion, as a defensive core. Neither of them have a reliable recovery, and they really don't check each other's backs too well. So his team is very easy to break defensively, and I don't think the offensive synergy is there to warrant such an offensive team. I think he really needs a much better breaker to complement his Mega Gallade, especially a Dark type, because he really has nothing that deals with the Psychic type super well. Like Blacephalon sure can crush Psychic types, but you can't bring a Blacephalon in without momentum, and his team doesn't really have a lot of momentum. You've got like Zapdos and Persian a little bit, but Blacephalon is something you need either U-turn support to get in or something like that. I think this team could really benefit from having a strong Dark type, a Pursuit Trapper, maybe even a Hoopa Unbound to really crush Psychics for Gallade. But yeah, it just doesn't have it. So in my opinion, the defense on this team's very lacking. and he doesn't have the offensive synergy he needs to warrant such an offensive team. If he picks up a good, strong dark type, possibly a pursuit trapper, things to really make this offense come together, I think his team could be a lot better, and possibly a better steel type, more renewable walls. But yeah, my opinion, or my problem with the team is, as I said, not enough offensive synergy and very lackluster defensively. So I have it at number 9. Next, I have Flair's team. So this is a straight hyper offensive team. I don't mind it as far as hyper offense goes. I like Garchomp plus Excadrill, even though they're double grounds. Since their typings are so different, they're really not stepping on each other's toes. Garchomp's weak to Ice and Dragon. Excadrill isn't weak to either. Excadrill's weak to ground and water. And fire. Garchomp isn't weak to any of those. So really, typing-wise, they don't have the same weaknesses. But offensively, they have the same checks, which sounds bad at first, but in a lot of ways is not a bad thing, because they become redundant. If you have something like, say, a Skarmory on your team, it's hard to wall both Garchomp and Excadrill. It puts a lot of pressure on it. If he's got, like, say, an SD Garchomp with Fire Fang to break a Skarm, especially if they're not adequately prepped and know that this is or didn't know that was a possibility, then his Excadrill is he's going to be able to break Excadrill's checks with Garchomp because they have such similar checks. Either that, or they're going to have to be forced to bring 2 different things for each of them, and since they're so similar, it's hard to have. Teams usually don't have 2 things that do both of them. But my problem with the team is that although I don't have any super problems with the team, really, like, it's got no defensive backbone, but you really can't expect it to with a hyper offense team. But he doesn't switch in well into any given type, and I think he should have a bit better speed than he does if he wants hyper offense. Like Starmie and Pidgeot have great speed tiers, but I really would have liked him to see him grab something a bit faster than a Swellow or something, or a bit faster than a Pidgeot, because he leaves his team really susceptible to something like a Mega Lopunny. Like, a Mega Lopunny is just going to absolutely crush his team. His team, I really think he would benefit from having something fast, like very, very fast, because he puts himself in a scenario where he's forced to run Scarfers to force out anything faster than him, and certain offensive threats will outspeed his entire team, and you really don't want offensive threats outspeeding your entire team when you have a hyper offense. And being forced to run Scarfers, A, makes you predictable, and B, gives your opponent reliable switch-ins to things. And the team's a hair predictable. Gigalith plus Garchomp and Sand and Excadrill, Webs and Galvantula. You know the possibilities when it's coming, and his defensive things, like, you're probably not going to see Ferroseed, and if you do, it's not going to do much. So I think the team's a bit predictable, and he needs some more speed on it. And I do like Amoonguss on the team, but I mean, I've never been much of a fan for hyper offense, and I think he needs a bit more speed if he wants to make it work, and possibly a slightly better breaker than he has now. And Ferronape and Garchomp are both fairly good breakers, but I think they're both can be walled fairly easily by certain things, and especially in certain scenarios, you're going to be forced to have Scarfers. And what is he scarfing? His Excadrill. If he's scarfing his Excadrill, it can't Sand Sweep. If he's scarfing his Garchomp, then he's losing one of his only 2 breakers. If he's scarfing in Ferronape, he's losing one of his only 2 breakers. So I don't know. I'm not a giant fan of it in that sense, but as far as hyper offense goes, I think it can definitely get some wins and do okay, especially if he plays it right. But not a giant fan of hyper offense, and those are the flaws I see in it. Next up, I have Dolty's team at number 7. This is the first team, I think, that tries to be truly balanced, and that's what I appreciate, is a team that balances offense and defense nicely. I do have some problems with the team, though. I really like the team's speed. Zeraora plus Crobat plus Houndoom gives him a lot of really good speed options and some really threatening offense. It's almost like a hair too fast in that, Zeraora is so fast. I mean, no, I really wouldn't say that. But some things I don't like about the team, it's a bit weak to ice and extremely weak to fairy. His ice resists is Primarina and Houndoom. Neither of those are very reliable. Houndoom certainly doesn't want to reliably come in and take ice hits, especially if they're strong ice hits. Primarina doesn't have reliable recovery either. So neither of them appreciate coming in and taking ice hits. And his fairy resist is Crobat, which is really not a good look in my opinion. That's not how it should be. Because A, you know that he's bringing in Crobat on your fairy, which makes it predictable, and B, if he doesn't, he's forced to bring Crobat to any team with a decent fairy, and even then Crobat doesn't do a great job of dealing with fairies. If he's playing like a Tapu Koko, what's he going to do? I guess Tapu Koko doesn't have the strongest fairy stab, but he's got Gastrodon, but there's a bad example. Something like a Clefable. If he just brings Bolt Beam Clef, I don't think Crobat has the strength to break a Clef. Especially if you've got Calm Minds up, fully defensive. Bolt Beam Clef or Moonblast Ice Beam Clef completely annihilates his team. Things like that. I think he needs a Steel type. He doesn't have a Steel type, and I think a Steel type is essential for a draft. Especially when Bronzong went undrafted. Bronzong is a fantastic Steel type in my opinion. It's a very, very good Steel in Tier 4. That's definitely a possible pickup for him to patch this weakness, but yeah, I think you definitely need a Steel type to do well. Is missing a Steel type. His flying resist is Zeraora, which I mean is okay, but Zeraora certainly doesn't appreciate coming in and taking hits, especially if it's predicted. So yeah, a solid Steel type I think would really help out this draft. Maybe a bit more support for Zygarde because it's such a good offensive Pokemon, but really the only thing that comes in and deals with the grass types he has, he's got Crobat and Houndoom which do an okay job at it, but I would have liked to see maybe something a bit more powerful work with it, but I guess it's fair enough that he has some decent support for it. But yeah, I think the lack of a Steel really holds this team back. Next up is Kudo's team. I think Kudo's team is it's okay. It has very good typing coverage or typing resistances. He really, I can't pinpoint a certain type that he's weak to, like maybe Steel, but he's got Rotom for that, which is okay, Electros and Floatzel, which are okay, and Charizard, which is very good. I would maybe like to see some things that take the pressure off Charizard a bit more, so that Charizard doesn't have to be the only thing coming in and taking grass hits, taking Steel hits, things like that. But I mean, just so that Charizard can preserve its health if he wants to use a Dragon Dance set, things like that, to try and win a game. But it's definitely definitely not a bad team. I like his speed tiers. Weavile and Lycanroc are very good. Then he's got Floatzel, which is also pretty good. And then he's got some fairly fast defense, which I'm a fan of. He's got Uxie, which is surprisingly fast, Klefki, which has got some decent speed. So his defense can outrun possible wall breakers, which is a very nice feature. And he's got some very nice breakers. He's got very nice breakers in Weavile, Charizard, Nidoqueen, and some very nice win conditions in possibly Scarf Nidoqueen, Calm Mind Clef, DD Zardex, Belly Drum, Flame Charge, Weavile, just because it can outrun entire teams a lot of the time. Maybe even SD Lycanroc if the team's very rock weak. So yeah, I like the team. My biggest issue with it is that the hazard removal isn't fantastic, and when you're running Zardex and Weavile, you want to have fantastic hazard removal. Like Klefki's okay with Prankster defog, but it's if they bring a dark type, they can really shut down your defogging, which is not good for you. And he's got, I believe, 5 Stealth Rockers, Lycanroc, Piloswine, Nidoqueen, Uxie, Clefable. Like, if you have 5 Stealth Rockers, it's going to be very easy for you to get rocks up in any given game. So I'd love for him to have a Rapid Spinner. That way he could really control the hazard game. Because it's very easy for him to get up rocks, but he also really wants to keep them away. And if he wants to keep them away, he's got to defog with Rotom or Klefki. And I think his team would really appreciate a Rapid Spinner. And I'm not a giant fan of his bulk. Clefable and Charizard are fantastic, but against things that beat them, like ground types and such, ground types he doesn't have the best switch-ins to. He's got like Rotom, Uxie, and Electros, but none of those are extremely solid, and none of them have reliable recovery. His team is a bit susceptible to being worn down, in my opinion. So more renewable defense and better hazard control, I think, would make his team a lot better, but I like his team. Next up, I have Reggie. So his team is built around the defensive. He has a very nice defensive core of Tapu Fini, Ferrothorn, and Porygon 2, and then he's got some very nice breakers and bird spam, which I think all synergize very well, but I think the team has some fundamental problems with it. Namely, the Fini Ferro core. Although they do match together very well typing-wise, I'm really not a fan of the two, because they both don't have reliable recovery, and they're both very easy to wear down, and really very easy to shut down. If you have something that has reliable recovery, then these two aren't really ever going to do anything to you. They've got decent offensive stats, but it's not good enough to beat anything else that is also defensive. So, like, at worst, if you bring a defensive Pokemon, you can just bring him to a standstill with anything against his Fat. If you bring something with Taunt, there's nothing he can do. And I think his team is very, very susceptible to knockoff. Ferrothorn hates losing its lefties. Tapu Fini hates it even more, and Porygon 2 hates losing its lefties even more than that. So although I do appreciate how all three of them fit together, in that Porygon 2 safe from status because of Fini, and Fini and Ferrothorn go together very well typing wise. I really wish he would I think he would benefit a lot from having a reliable knockoff switch in, and maybe a good wish passer. I know he got Wigglytuff to pass wishes, but Wigglytuff is not a Pokemon, so that's a little bit of an issue. So yeah, he's very susceptible to being worn down, especially by very strong attackers. He really doesn't like knockoff, and his team's a bit too slow for my liking. He's got good speed in Pinsir and Torn, but other than that, his team is very slow. He's got Nidoking next in line, and Fini's actually decently fast, but a lot of his Fat are things that are always going to be outsped by Fat breakers. So things that really are meant to break Fat are going to have a good time against him, and I don't think he has the recovery to really wall anything super hard. But I do like his offensive synergy. I do like how Nidoking goes together with Pinsir, and I just really... And his defensive core is good enough to work against certain teams, especially if he's able to apply a lot of pressure so his defense doesn't have to do too much work. But I think he's missing some certain critical elements to support this defensive core. And his offense is solid, but I think he could definitely use a bit more speed, especially because Pinsir is something that you don't want to be bringing in all game, especially if there's rocks up, and his hazard control should be a bit better. I know Tapu Fini is a decent defogger, and Torn, but I don't know, maybe I'd like to see a rapid spinner. Torn plus Finny is fair enough, I guess, but yeah, I just main gripe with the team is I really think he should get a better wish passer, a better knockoff switch in. So yeah, but I do like the team offensively and defensively. It is very sound, and that's why I have it at number 5, which is fairly high as far as the rankings go. Next up, I have Jesus Vasilev's 47 and the Puerto Rico Frokies. So there's a lot of things I really like about this team. The biggest thing I like is its speed, specifically the speed of its fat. It's got some really solid fat in things like Metagross, Gliscor, Volcanion, Nihilego, even Delphox. But all of these mons have very good speed at the same time as being fat, which I think is really nice. So he can switch into things, but also apply pressure at the same time. Things like Gliscor has really good speed, but it can also switch in on pretty much anything, and then usually outspeed it because its speed is so good. So I do like that. I think the slight problem is that due to having all this speed, his draft can be a bit unsturdy. But Mega Audino as a last resort isn't bad. Metagross isn't bad. Latios is solid. He's got some really fast bulk, which I'm a fan of. Being able to check things offensively, if you can, is better than checking them defensively, in my opinion, because applying pressure is always a good thing. So I really like his speed, or the speed of his bulk. But there's a lot of things that I don't like, and I think that the team has some very good offensive synergy and defensive synergy. Volcanion and Gliscor's typing fit really nicely together. He's got a very solid Fairy Dragon Steel in Latios, Metagross, and Mega Audino, which is surprisingly bulky. Mega Audino can pass wishes into things like Volcanion and Metagross, which appreciate it because they don't get reliable recovery. So I think defensively the team is very sound. There's not really a type, or I'll get to that later, but there's only like one type I would consider really gives him a problem. And offensively, he's got some very strong offense, and I think it's hard to stop, especially if he's hazard stacking. So I really like his team offensively and defensively typing wise, and I like the speed of it, but the big things I think hold this team back is that Latios is the fastest mon. That should not happen. That leaves him really susceptible to anything that's faster than Latios, which, although his bulk is really nice and forcing things out because they're fast, anything that's faster than Latios is going to give his team some serious trouble. He's going to be forced to run a lot of Scarfers, which is not ideal. So I think he should have something faster than Latios on his team. Yeah, I think that would help him immensely. And it's one of the key weaknesses of it. And I think he should also have better switch-ins into Earthquake, because Earthquake is everywhere. Or not even better switch-ins into Earthquake. I think his team's just weak to Earthquake in general, because pretty much everything gets Earthquake. And because everything gets Earthquake, it tends to almost, or a lot of the time, be a free move to use against him, because he's got 1 ground weak, 2 ground weak, 3 ground weak, 4 ground weak, and then a 5 quad ground weak. He's got a ton of things that really don't appreciate Earthquake, and opponents against him can really run Earthquake on anything and give him a headache, especially if they're things that beat his very few things that actually resist Earthquake, being Latios and Gliscor and Masquerain, but is really not resisting anything. So if he's going to really struggle against teams that have that there are teams with strong ground types, really, especially ground types that can deal with his flying types. So yeah, his team's very ground weak, and I think he should have more speed, but I do like what's going on defensively and offensively on the team. Next up, I have Classiel and Mulliferous Melodic. There's a lot I like about this team. It's very sturdy defensively, which I like. I think Tapu Bulu complements the team very well, giving him really strong breaking, but at the same time, healing Mega Venusaur, which really loves getting healing Melodic, which definitely appreciates it and makes running Flame Orb a lot more viable if he needs it in a matchup. Jirachi's a solid, very solid steal to complement Mega Venusaur and cover his weaknesses. His team's very hard to break defensively. And I really think defensively his team's one of the strongest ones in the league. I don't see any like super glaring weaknesses or types that'll really mess this team up. Possibly Flying Spam, but he's got Aerodactyl to help with that, Electabuzz, and Jirachi. So I don't know. I really like the team defensively. My biggest issues with the team is on the offensive side. Bulu is a good breaker, but it's not that fast. So against faster teams, Bulu's going to have a really hard time breaking. And against faster teams, Aerodactyl, I really don't like the offensive core of Aerodactyl, Zygarde, Sneasel. They're all very frail. None of them appreciate taking a hit from really anything. 2 of them are quad weak to ice. 2 of them are weak to steel. It makes it very easy for opponents to run Scarfers that'll pretty much shut down his offense, which I don't think is great. I do like Zydoge on the team, but I just don't like the combination of these 3 offensively. These 3 are his main offensive presence, except for like maybe Entei or Scarf Bulus. But yeah, I just would like to see more synergy offensively, and I don't like how his two best offensive mons are both quad weak to ice and outrun by Scarfers. I don't think that's ideal at all. So yeah, fantastic defense. I think it's just a bit lackluster on offense, but I think the defense will be able to carry this team and it should do well. Next, I have the Boston Buzzwole and Jeff 9101's team. I like this team a lot. I think it's very balanced defensively and offensively. He's got Slowbro, Cobalion, Venusaur, Togekiss, even Volcarona is very bulky on the special side. Tyranitar is very bulky on the special side. They complement Slowbro and Cobalion being very bulky on the physical type, even Landotee to some extent. Claydol is a great spinner to help out, not a great spinner, but it's okay. That helps out Togekiss, and Volcarona. Sableye gives some nice taunt to shut down Rockers to help out Volcarona. Yeah, I like the team. The speed tiers are nice on it. Jolteon's very fast. Then he's got, what's his face? Ambipom, which gives him some good speed options as well. Cobalion's very fast, gives him some defensive and offensive options. I like how he has Tyranitar to help out Cobalion, because usually your steel type would be handling the flying types, but Tyranitar does a great job of it. Tyranitar and Landorus go together pretty well in my opinion, with Landorus resisting the fighting and ground types that Tyranitar doesn't appreciate, and Landorus being able to pivot very well with U-turn and invite in flying types that Tyranitar can come in, put up rocks on, set up Dragon Dances on. So yeah, I like this team offensively, and defensively I think it's very sound, and I just don't see any really super glaring weaknesses with it. He's got good rockers, maybe a bit too weak to rocks himself, but he's got okay defoggers. He's got Landorus, which doesn't appreciate always having to run defog. Same thing with Togekiss. It can defog, but it doesn't appreciate it, especially since it's weak to rocks. Claydol, but it's definitely not ideal to bring Claydol to every game. But so other than possibly a bit too weak to rocks, I really like how this team works. I think Tyranitar is a very underrated mega. He's got solid speed. Yeah, I just like the team in general. I think it's very nicely balanced offensively and defensively. Z-Move Landorus T is very nice as well. So yeah. Lastly, I have the only Tepig and Auckland Blastoise at number 1. I think the team's made very well. Lopunny is very, very scary, and Victini is a fantastic breaker to weaken certain threats to the point where Lopunny can clean. I really think that Victini's not the ideal breaker to work with Lopunny. Like, a breaker plus cleaner is always a nice to have, but I think possibly a breaker that worked a bit better with what Lopunny has troubles with would be nice. Victini does like smash steals, which is helpful for Lopunny, because although steals are weak to its fighting type, lots of steals aren't, through being steel psychic type, steel poison type. Not steel poison, but yeah, mainly steel psychic. There's quite a few steel psychics out there, and when they run protect, it can really give Lopunny some issues. But Victini and Lopunny are by no means bad partners. Raikou and Hydreigon are fantastic partners. Raikou comes in resisting flying moves directed at Lopunny and can Volt Switch, grab him some momentum. Victini can also be a momentum grabber if needed. Decidueye and Sylveon get U-turn in, but both of them get Baton Pass. Decidueye gets U-turn, so he's got some really nice momentum options to bring in his breakers a lot. And he's got some really nice resistances to complement Lopunny. He's got fighting resists and or these three all together here. Flying resists in Raikou and Stack Attack and Rhydon, which, if I'm honest, aren't the most solid things. And what else is this thing weak to? Psychic. And Psychic resist, a very solid Psychic resist in Hydreigon. There are a few weaknesses to this draft, but I think it's probably the strongest draft just because of how strong the Volt Turn is, plus Victini, plus cleaning with Lopunny, I think is very powerful. In my opinion, the team's a bit slow. He's got Lopunny and Raikou, which are very fast, but then after that, his speed really starts to dwindle, and he has to rely on Scarfers. Hydreigon's not a terrible scarf, or Hydreigon definitely doesn't mind being scarfed, like, every game. It really doesn't mind. So that's definitely an option, and it'll always be getting him momentum, but I think his speed's maybe a hair too limited outside of those two. His fat is pretty slow, which is not a terrible thing, but it allows wall breakers to do much better against him. But the biggest gripe I have with the team is Stack Attacka as the steel type. Although Stack Attacka is incredibly bulky, it is by no means a reliable steel. Just throw on like a hidden power fighting, hidden power ground, and it really isn't never going to be taking it well from anything that a steel type is supposed to be checking. It's definitely not the most reliable way to not the most reliable steel in general. Although he does have things that ease the pressure off of what Stack Attacka should be doing, like Raikou to take the flying type attacks and Hydreigon to take the psychic type attacks. Having a strong steel is something that I really value, and I don't think Stack Attacka is the reliable steel that most teams, that really I think most teams need. It's a fantastic wall breaker, but I don't think it really fills the role of sturdy steel just because it's like steel's usually wanted for the typing, but Stack Attacka with the added rock typing makes its typing really awful, being weak to earthquake, being weak to water, being weak to quad weak to ground, or I already said that, but quad weak to fighting. It really turns the great defensive typing of steel into a not great typing, and it's not a reliable steel, and I really think a strong steel would complement him well, especially to go with Sylveon and Hydreigon, but nonetheless I still think that's a bit nitpicking, and that his draft is the strongest out of everyone. But yeah, that's my rankings on team value alone after week 1, and I hope you enjoyed.